fragile hope emerges from the rubble. Hamas has accepted a 60-day truce, offering to release half of the hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and aid. Egypt and Qatar say the ball is in Israel's court, but Netanyahu's demands all hostages freed at once, while his cabinet prepares to occupy Gaza City. With over 62,000 dead, famine widespread, and calls for a Judaized Gaza growing louder, is this a path to peace or just the calm before another deeper aggression? Welcome to In Depth. Axios has reported that Egypt and Qatar have successfully brokered a new ceasefire proposal that Hamas has accepted. This step offers a crucial chance to de-escalate the conflict and save lives, as it includes a 60-day truce and the release of some detainees. However, the Israeli government appears hesitant, with Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly dismissing the progress and emphasizing plans for a ground occupation of Gaza City. This signals a possible rejection of a diplomatic solution, despite immense regional and internal pressure. The situation is at a crossroads. The success of the talks and the fate of the detainees now depends on Israel's response. International parties must push for the acceptance of this deal to prevent further escalation and the worsening of a humanitarian disaster. According to the Times of Israel, a deep political division has emerged in Israel following Hamas's acceptance of a new ceasefire proposal. The offer, which includes a 60-day truce and the release of detainees, has been celebrated by the families of the captives. However, hardline ministers within the Israeli government are vehemently against the deal. They argue that accepting a partial agreement would be a sign of weakness and believe the full occupation of Gaza City is the only way to secure the return of all detainees. This internal conflict places immense pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. His decision will determine if the conflict can be de-escalated through diplomacy or if it will escalate further with a ground invasion, a move many fear would worsen the humanitarian catastrophe. Gaza bleeds under tons of rubble and massive starvation. Now a ceasefire bid ignites hope, but as Hamas agrees, Israel advances. Will peace prevail, or will war crush this chance? The world holds its breath.
For years, Gaza has bled. Over 62,000 Palestinians killed. Famine spreads. Hospitals lie in ruins. And now, amid the ashes, comes a fragile whisper of hope. Families still search for loved ones beneath the debris. In overcrowded displacement camps, bodies are removed daily, not from battle, but from starvation. 263 have died of hunger, 112 of them children. Yet even as Hamas accepts a 60-day ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar, Israel intensifies its assault. Just hours after the announcement, tanks pushed into Al-Sabra, surrounding UN-run clinics sheltering hundreds. The proposal? A temporary truce. Release of 10 living Israeli hostages and 18 bodies in exchange for 200 Palestinian prisoners, 140 serving life sentences. Humanitarian aid, fuel, and electricity to flow. Israeli forces to pull back near the border. Hamas says yes, but Israeli media claims it's a tactic. to stop the planned occupation of Gaza City. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir has approved the operation. The ball, they say, is in Netanyahu's court. But Netanyahu demands all for all hostages, no partial deals. Yet pressure mounts. Hundreds of thousands protest in Tel Aviv, while hardliners like Ben Gvir push for total war. The plan aligns 98% with the U.S. proposal previously accepted by Israel. Mediators say this is not surrender, it is a bridge to a permanent deal with guarantees for Gaza's future. But time is running out. The healthcare system has collapsed. Hunger is a weapon, and the world watches. Will this truce be a pause or a path? The heart is still in Gaza. Now the question echoes. Will Tel Aviv choose peace or perpetuate the aggression? The world waits, the people suffer, the choice is now.
Providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning Hamas's acceptance of the ceasefire proposal and the uncertainties when it comes to the Israeli response, we're joined from Cairo by Ambassador Hisham Youssef, a senior advisor to the European Institute of Peace, and from Washington by Ms. Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst. Thank you both for joining me here on In Depth. Firstly, let's start off with you, Mr. Ambassador. Now, Hamas has accepted the truce. Is this surrender under siege or a genuine opening for the possibility of peace?
Well, we're not talking about peace. We're talking about a temporary ceasefire. And then hopefully this temporary ceasefire will result in negotiations that aims to achieve a permanent ceasefire. So this is one of the problems. The problem is that Israel is not interested in talking about peace. It is talking about all kinds of things to satisfy its interests, but not intending to advance the prospects of peace, whether in Gaza, the West Bank, with the Palestinians in general, or to deal with this issue in a comprehensive way.
So if I could follow up there, Mr. Ambassador, what you're trying to say is even if the Israelis say accept this deal for a temporary ceasefire, they may well, go back to, attacking Gaza right after the 60 days.
Not even after the 60 days. Oh, why did they break the first ceasefire that was reached in January? Was there a reason? Did Hamas violate the ceasefire agreement? As a matter of fact, it was Israel that violated the ceasefire agreement in January because it did not allow negotiations to resume on the 14th day as it was stipulated in the ceasefire agreement on a lasting ceasefire. And it didn't agree to negotiate again and then went back to war without a reason why they decided to do so. So we have a much bigger problem than thinking about what would happen in the coming 60 days. So, of course, we hope that we will achieve a ceasefire, but the problem is much bigger than that.
Okay, now, Ms. Chapman, if we could get your opinion here. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu insists that all hostages must come or be released at once. Is this based on a principled stand, for instance, or is this just a political maneuver to give him cover to continue on with the war, and he doesn't really care about the well-being of the hostages?
Well, first, thank you, Reham, for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and your distinguished guest. And Netanyahu's demand for all of the hostages in one go, this is not a genuine negotiating tactic to get the return of the hostages back home. This is a ploy by Netanyahu to stall and obstruct further negotiations. This is a very common, I don't even want to say negotiating tactic, but it's a common tactic to insert a poison pill condition into the negotiations, one or two conditions that are so unreasonable that the other party cannot accept them. And then Israel looks reasonable. They're saying, hey, we want to negotiate, but in truth, they have brought it to a halt. So demanding the release of all the hostages is a way to stop the negotiations, because right now the hostages are really the only shield that the people of Palestine have against continued bombing, even though they are being starved. and also Netanyahu has had two other chances at least to get the hostages back home. Right after October 7th, he was offered all the hostages in exchange for IDF not going into Gaza, and he refused. And shortly thereafter, he was also offered all the hostages in return for the IDF moving out of Gaza, and he refused. Netanyahu has never shown any concern for the hostages other than as a tool of manipulation to use them to tug on heartstrings and to apply political pressure on the people of Israel and the rest of the world. Indeed, we see the families of the hostages in Israel are angry with Netanyahu. They claim he was refusing to do anything to bring the hostages back. And this is part of Netanyahu's longer-term strategy. He did admit in the media about a week ago that he is pro the vision of Greater Israel. This is the first time he said outright that, yes, this is part of their plan. And the first time, as the ambassador mentioned, the first time Israel broke the ceasefire, it was not because of conditions on the ground or anything Hamas did. It was because Adam Boehler and Steve Witkoff had decided to negotiate directly with Hamas. This is toxic to Israel, because if there's ever direct negotiations with Hamas, this means that there is a chance for peace and an end to the war in Gaza, which is the last thing that Netanyahu wants. The war in Gaza is part of his expansive territorial acquisition, the Greater Israel Project, to get Gaza. We've seen that the settlers have almost cleared the West Bank. Indeed, Smotrich announced earlier this week that settlers were going to be allowed to build in the E1 zone of the West Bank, which had previously for 20 years been off limits to settlers because this was land reserved for a future Palestinian state. So Smotrich saying they will build there is a slap in the face to the Palestinians and the international community, who realize that these two-state solution, having a Palestinian state where they're sovereign and no longer attacked and bombed by Israel, is the only solution to lasting peace in the entire regional Middle East, because Gaza and Palestine is an open, continuous sore. It's a cancer, and there will never be peace in the region until we solve Palestine. And there are other developments here at home in the United States. There's a big battle brewing because we have private donor groups that are offering aid to the Palestinians. And we now have, for example, Laura Loomer, a fringe figure who is much maligned on the right. Somehow she's gotten the ear of Trump. And she has posted on X that Palestinian children have been brought to the United States for medical care. Right now, Palestine has the largest number of children with amputated limbs in the entire world. The children in Palestine are being bombed. Their limbs are...
I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off there, Ms. Chapman, but like to just follow up, as you've said, that basically Israel has expansionist, ideas, and they want to have Greater Israel, or whatever it is. The Americans or the American government are basically the only people or the only entity that can sort of pressure the Israelis into taking this deal. Is there a possibility that the US government right now may possibly pressure the Israeli side into taking this deal?
Well, one thing that we are hoping is that as Trump wraps up Ukraine, he can turn his attention to Gaza. The American people have been very disappointed the way Trump speaks of Gaza and the Palestinians compared to the way he speaks of stopping the killing in Ukraine. But he has not said we need to stop the killing in Gaza. This is tearing apart the Republican Party. We have deep divisions. People are taking sides. The approval rating of Israel is plummeting in America. And we now have members of Congress that are actively opposing continued aid to Israel. We want to stop the arms embargo. We want to increase humanitarian aid. So what we need now is, for some reason, Trump has been in the pocket of Netanyahu, the big money donors, but there is now resistance in Congress and on the part of the American people to prevent Trump from handing Palestine to Israel. So, and this is one of the reasons why the upcoming negotiations are very important, because there is pressure on Trump from more than just the Israeli side right now. We feel this is our chance to break the grip that the Israeli lobby has had, not just on Trump, but on American foreign policy, to move forward, because this is unsustainable. And indeed, we can no longer protect Israel as they are waging war in southern Lebanon, in Syria. We are out of weapons. We do need to resolve this issue with Israel's aggression, because, and we do suspect they want to resume attacks on Iran. We figured they had 90 to 120 days to restock their weapons. We're thinking sometime in September, Israel may resume attacks on Iran. This is unbearable to the American people. We have no weapons. We cannot sustain this any longer.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, if we could sort of get your opinion here. Now, you heard Ms. Chapman talking about the idea of, you know, the Israelis wanting some sort of expansion, Greater Israel, and all of that. Now, with Israel threatening to occupy Gaza City, this plays into this idea. Is this ceasefire a sort of pause towards this goal, or just, you know, a tactic, a negotiating tactic, I suppose, to get a breather and, you know, decrease the pressure or international pressure on the Israelis so they can later go ahead and occupy Gaza City and then play into the Greater Israel ploy?
Well, Israel wants more than that. The question is not only having total military control over Gaza City. The question is that Israel now is aiming to liquefy the Palestinian question once and for all, and to do that with, you know, the interests of Israel only in mind. And this does not only apply to Gaza. This also applies to what's happening in the West Bank. It applies to what's happening in Jerusalem. So sadly, the problem is that this would continue. And as a matter of fact, despite the outrage in the whole world in relation to the starvation policy, the starvation continues until today. And my fear as well is that even if we have a ceasefire, I don't think that Israel would allow humanitarian assistance in with the quantities that are needed for the Palestinian people. And also, even if we have a ceasefire understanding or agreement in the near future, I'm not sure that Israel would be allowing material in for early recovery or, you know, let alone talking about reconstruction. So Israel is bent on mass displacement of Palestinians from Gaza and from the West Bank. And I think we have an uphill battle in relation to how things would evolve, even if we are successful in achieving the temporary ceasefire and even if we are successful in achieving a permanent ceasefire.
So, Mr. Ambassador, if I can follow up there, I mean, what you're saying is a very, you know, dire situation right now. Like, how can the Israeli side be stopped from, you know, continuing on with the plan of occupying Gaza City or attempting to not allow aid in and all of that? How can the international community help in handling this situation?
Well, there has to be an incentive system and a disincentive system. An incentive system for Israel to move towards a more constructive path towards peace, or a disincentive system in order to put pressure to bear on Israel to do the right thing. Now, the problem is that as Ms. Chapman was talking about the support of the U.S., if the support of the U.S. continues in an unconditional manner without caring about what is happening to people who are starving, or what's happening by settlers in the West Bank, or what's happening in relation to annexation, in relation to expansion of settlements, in relation to E1, as also Ms. Chapman was saying, if all this continues and the rest of the international community is not willing to put pressure to bear on Israel, then sadly this deterioration would continue, unfortunately.
Okay, now, Ms. Chapman, you spoke a bit about the idea of, you know, the Israelis having some sort of grip or hold on the U.S. government, specifically Trump. Now, Axios talked about this. According to Axios, Trump recently urged the Israelis to expand attacks on Hamas, saying that, you know, the detainees would not be released until Hamas was, quote, confronted and destroyed. Do you think Trump's remarks align with Netanyahu's push for the full occupation of Gaza instead of accepting, the ceasefire proposal? And do you think this is based on, I suppose, the hold that the Israeli lobby has on the U.S. government?
Yes, exactly, Reham. You have made an excellent point. And Trump's bellicose, inhumane language it's a reflection of the big money donors, the Adelsons, AIPAC, and this indeed is what is causing the battle within the American government and within the American people, because we see that our foreign policy is no longer our own. The American people and voters are strongly opposed to the genocide, to the ethnic cleansing, and the displacement of the Palestinian people. And we are now battling with our own government. And once again, we are hoping that at some point Trump wakes up and sees what his position is compared to the American people who want this to stop. And there are essentially, the American people are trying to get our government to stop, but in the meantime, our senators are battling to stop arms exports to Israel. Other countries, Germany has announced they are going to stop arms exports to Israel. The issue with the other countries is America is so powerful that when another country speaks up and tries to protect the Palestinians, America threatens the other country. So even our Arab partners who are Israeli neighbors are afraid to speak up. We see countries like Jordan, Egypt, the United States government threatens them on one hand and offers them money on the other hand to buy and threaten their silence. We see Egypt and Qatar, and even now Jordan, they're working very hard because they see they will be impacted by the displacement of the Palestinian people. And what the American people are pushing for now is an economic boycott. We are hoping that other countries can unite and boycott the Israeli economy. They are already
but wasn't there some sort of backlash from the U.S. government when, he came out with a statement saying that basically states that will boycott Israeli products will, not receive funding for disaster funding, basically?
And that is an inclination of how out of control it is becoming for our federal government, for the president, that he is now threatening states because they want to boycott Israel. And before, I was specifically speaking about an international economic boycott of other governments around the world, just in opposition and resistance, much as the very brave Ansar Allah fighters are doing in Yemen, and they are taking an incredible beating because of this. But if other countries, without even a military intervention, could organize economic boycotts of the country of Israel, this would do a great deal towards expressing international displeasure and also hitting the economy where it hurts. They have already had to close the port of Eilat. They suffered a great deal of damage to their infrastructure and their ports and imports during the 12-day war. And this is not, Israel has been engaged in this for decades. There is resistance around the world. The biggest problem, I agree, is the American military might behind Israel. However, this is changing because the American people are no longer support Israel. Israel has lost the Democrats. The Democrat Party is completely opposed to Israel now. And we're seeing in the Republican Party, the younger Republicans and normal Christians are turning away from Israel. And we just have the older establishment, the military-industrial complex, and the evangelical Christian Zionists who are now being insulted for their worship of Israel instead of worshiping Jesus. Indeed, we even saw yesterday Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress issued a statement to the Christians who are worshiping Israel instead of worshiping Jesus and saying that that their way is wrong. So this is tearing apart America on so many levels, our government, our churches, our society. And this cannot go on. It is unsustainable. And once again, we want the international community to overcome American support. And we do see that Netanyahu will use this 60 days to regroup and rearm because he is not interested in peace, which is why we have to impose it on him, even in spite of our own American military support of Israel, which is slipping in this country. And at some point, Donald Trump will get that
buckle under the pressure, yes. Well, Mr. Ambassador, if we can get your opinion here. Now, I know you're not very optimistic about the prospects here, but the proposal, the ceasefire proposal itself, allows for the possibility of talks for a permanent ceasefire from day one. If the Israeli side accepts this, does this somehow break the old cycle of failed deals in the past that we've seen?
Sadly, I don't think so. I hope it does. But the question is not, again, it's not about the ceasefire. The question is about the ultimate objective. Is the ultimate objective to advance the prospects of peace, have a permanent ceasefire, have a path through which we can resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? The answer is no. Israel wants to expand further in the West Bank, annex more land, build more settlements, and so on. And as far as Gaza is concerned, they want to depopulate Gaza. And this has been said time and again by senior government officials in Israel. So I don't think that, just accepting to start negotiations is a recipe for the situation to improve. No, the question is whether Israel would be having reasonable demands in relation to how things should advance in the future with the help of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. But with this attitude of having wanting to impose surrender conditions on all the Palestinians in order to stop the military attacks and so on, this will not work. And this will not work also in the West Bank with what's happening with settler violence and annexation and settlement expansion.
Okay, now, Ms. Chapman, with the massive protests in Tel Aviv demanding a deal, is Netanyahu losing control of Israel's domestic narrative? I mean, the families of the detainees in Gaza are very, very upset with what's happening right now. Do you think this is enough pressure on the Israeli government or Netanyahu specifically?
The protests in Israel, in Tel Aviv, will not be enough pressure on Netanyahu, but the world has seen the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people protesting around the world and also in Tel Aviv, in Israel. This will not be enough to sway Netanyahu. He has the support of his right-wing cabinet, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir. However, the reservists, the Israeli military, the IDF, their generals have been writing letters to Netanyahu saying that the war is unsustainable. The reservists who have served before are refusing to show up. They see that this is a futile war. They see that if the IDF tries to occupy Gaza, it will be another Vietnam. It will be a quagmire. They are losing in Gaza, which is why Ariel Sharon pulled out in 2005. And now here we are 10 years later, Netanyahu wants to get back into Gaza. The new soldiers are refusing to report for duty. So the IDF, the military, as a man, are rebelling against the occupation of Gaza. And we're also seeing resistance from the Haredim. This has subsided. But essentially, it's going to be the IDF and the military that is going to be the weak link for Netanyahu's plan to occupy Gaza. And it's unworkable. He will not, they do not have the forces. It's going to be a quagmire. However, the most important thing with the ceasefire is to somehow stop the killing, stop the IDF from shooting and killing Gazans as they come out looking for food, and also to stop the starvation, hopefully increase the humanitarian aid. The ceasefire hopefully will just bring some respite from the killing to the people of Gaza, long enough that we can get around the Netanyahu's duplicitous use of ceasefires as a cover to just regroup and attack again. Hopefully this will be the first step to forcing a long-lasting peace and solution and an end to the occupation upon Israel, because they're losing support rapidly.
Well, let's hope so. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. That was Ms. Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst, and Ambassador Hisham Youssef, a senior advisor to the European Institute of Peace. Thank you both for joining me, and thank you for your insights and the discussion. A truce hangs in the balance between hope and hunger, diplomacy and destruction. The world watches, Gaza waits, and this brings us to the end of this episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more here on Q News.